morning and welcome back to another episode of 56-Bit Cloud Cafe. I'm Atir Dalal and today we have an exciting episode lined up as we delve into the wonders of the EC2 universe. Welcome back to this new episode of EC2. In the previous episode, we've covered 3 topics: load balancing, storage options, and networking essentials. Today, we will go through new topics, and we have with us Patrick. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Atir. Thank you for having me back.
So, today we will be continuing our EC2 series of episodes. So, Let's start with the first question. Spot instances are intriguing. How can users leverage them for cost optimization?
All right, so EC2 instances are very easy to create, as we said before. You just go into the console and create them. When you're creating them, by default, the instances that are created are called on-demand, which means that once you create them, you can create as many as you want, and they will remain switched on for as long as you want or as long as something bad doesn't happen. So with spot instances, this is an option that you choose whilst creating those instances. It gives you the option to reduce the price of that instance big time, up to 90% off. On average, it's about 70% off, but this price fluctuates depending on demand. And the reason they give you this discount is because spot instances can be switched off by AWS, terminated by AWS at any point. So these are not good for your average web server, for example, which needs to remain switched on, but they are good for workloads which can take interruptions. For example, let's say every night you need to run a large workload where you are running the processing of your payroll system. If there is an interruption of, say, 1 hour or a few hours or even of one run of this payroll system, then it's fine. The workload will start running again later and it will be fine. In such situations, AWS will bring up the instances at a reduced price and will give you, most of the time they will not be terminated for you, but there is always the option, not the option, but rather AWS has the right to switch them off, terminate them for you at any point. So you're giving away this reliability for a reduced cost. But because of the way it works, it's not good for certain workloads which need to remain switched on. It's only good for workloads which can take interruptions. Just to tell you a bit about behind the scenes what happens, basically AWS obviously have a lot of servers, millions of servers around the world, and they will have periods of high demand and periods of very low demand. When there is very low demand, they prefer to give you these servers for a much reduced price than not selling anything. So they are getting revenue at a reduced amount, but they always retain that right to terminate those servers so that they can have the option of increasing the number of servers available if they want to. So basically it's a cost-saving mechanism which allows you to do this in a way which reduces your costs, but it has to be done for a workload which can support interruptions.
Dedicated hosts and placement groups are other advanced features. When should users consider these options, and how do they enhance EC2 deployments?
So the default EC2, when you bring up an instance, it is not part of a placement group, but you can define that particular instance is part of a placement group. A placement group is basically an extra instruction to AWS to tell it where your instance will reside. So there are placement groups which allow you to put your instances next to each other in the same data center, for example, and this will speed up networking between those servers. So certain workloads work better if there is very fast networking between a high number of servers. And that would be one particular type of placement group where it would increase the speed. Another type of placement group is when you split servers from each other. So you are forcing AWS, if you have two servers, one server is in one data center, the other is in a different data center, and this increases reliability. So it ensures that those servers are always separate from the physical hardware and separate even at the data center level if you wish. There are other types of placement groups, but ultimately, in general, these are instructions to AWS of where to physically place those multiple servers. You also asked me about dedicated instances. Dedicated instances are a special feature. Usually we don't use them a lot, but should you have a need for this, then you would use it. Basically, it allows you to create an instance, but it ensures that the physical hardware underneath, which has that instance on it, is never shared with anyone else. So it is only used by instances that are owned by you, by your AWS account. So like that, you are sure that the underlying processing and memory is being used by instances which you own. And this is ultimately a security feature. There are situations where you might want to do this because of compliance reasons or regulatory reasons. And these compliance and regulatory rules force you to have processing power which is not shared with other AWS accounts. Only you will have access to those instances, and the physical servers will be made up of instances that you own.
Let's end up with monitoring and troubleshooting EC2 instances. How can users set up CloudWatch for effective monitoring, and what are some common issues and their solutions?
Okay, so in AWS, whenever we want to monitor or log something, we usually use CloudWatch. CloudWatch is a separate service from EC2. It supports logging and metrics and dashboards from basically all services in AWS, as well as EC2, obviously. So one option is to use CloudWatch, where you, by default, a lot of metrics will already be switched on for you. Whenever you're using EC2, you can see those metrics in the CloudWatch dashboard. But one thing you must understand is that not everything is possible by default. So, for example, CPU usage, how much CPU you're using on an instance, that is done by default. So you just go to CloudWatch and you will see how much your instance is using at any point in time. On the other hand, because EC2 is a non-managed service, meaning AWS do not have access to what is inside the server, they cannot track memory, RAM usage. So for you to be able to log and have metrics around memory usage, you need to install a CloudWatch agent on that instance or instances. And that agent, once installed, it will start sending data to CloudWatch, and again, you'll be able to log and view the metrics through dashboards as well in CloudWatch. CPU and RAM are only two metrics. There are hundreds of others. You can log things like how much traffic is coming through to a load balancer, which we discussed before, how many requests are coming in to your instances, how many requests are going out from your instances, how much storage you're using, hundreds and hundreds of metrics. And CloudWatch is used for that. There are other ways of logging in EC2 as well. To note here is CloudTrail. CloudTrail is a separate service which logs every time someone or something does an action in AWS in general, including EC2. So if you log into the console, if you start an EC2 instance, if you terminate an instance, it will log who, where, and how that was done. So this is a security logging feature. You can also go down to the networking level. You can switch on logging at the VPC level, which allows you to identify what and how much traffic is coming and going from your EC2 instance. So these three together, CloudTrail, CloudWatch, and VPC logging, allow you to have the basics of logging. Do not forget as well that you do not need to use these. There are other services that are third party that can give you logging and can give you metrics separate from the AWS services. But those three are there built in and you can easily enable them.
So, thank you, Patrick, for shedding light on these critical topics about EC2. It was really a pleasure having you today in this episode.
Thank you.
If you have any questions you want us to answer it, please don't hesitate to put a comment or anything, or even you can reach us through social media and we will answer all your questions. Until then, happy cloud computing. To stay connected and never miss a beat, be sure to follow our podcast channel for the latest episodes. Also, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn to know more about all the updates in Cloudfield and to know more about our upcoming webinars and events.